In today's episode of the Rainmaker Family Show, we interviewed someone who has been known as the ATM Cash Queen, Samantha Guthrie. She took a $2,000 investment and turned it into a multi-million-dollar company that later had an 8-figure exit. Samantha and her husband worked side by side for many years together. And now after that exit, she is super passionate about pouring into entrepreneurs, learning from her hard mistakes so that you don't have to repeat them. So on today's show, went all different directions, talking about where this ATM machine idea even came from, that first investment, what she would do differently, and even like working with her spouse and the stresses of that in their business. Enjoy listening to today's episode.
All right. So Samantha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very honored to be part of your Rainmaker family today.
Yeah, if you were in our mastermind or in our community, you may recognize this face. She was on our couple of our events that we did on wealth building. And she just always was dropping bombs, dropping values. So we're like, we got to get a little bit more time with you on the show. So Samantha, I heard that you had 23 jobs before doing the ATM thing. Is this true? 23 jobs?
That might be an understatement, but yes. I had a philosophy. Well, so I got my first job when I was 14, and I'm 38 now. But I started young, but I also had a philosophy that if I was ever doing something that I didn't like, I needed to stop doing it and then do something else completely different. Like, don't ever go back. Like, if I've already learned the lesson, don't go back and get the other job. And I think you can do that when you're younger. It was more like exploring. When you get older and you're good at something, then of course you kind of want to take your talent with you and grow into your career. But at the time I was like, oh, I didn't like doing that. Okay, we're done with fast food, or, I'm done working in that environment, or I'm really bad at typing. So I'm just not the person for dictation, or, and so anytime I discovered, something that I really didn't like and needed to leave it, I'd go do something else. And that was, most of those jobs were before I got out of college. So,
yeah.
Wow.
Are there any like major lessons you learned? If you had to choose one job, a lesson that helped you later in your business journey, maybe something you're even using to this day?
One of my first jobs was actually in retail, like at a girls' clothing store. And the main thing about that is like, you're always on, right? Like the boss is looking at you, the clients are looking at you, and there's really just never a point in your life that you're not actually being observed by other people, whether that's your children or your coworkers or vendors. It really doesn't matter. Like you just need to be aware that every time you have the ability to be in front of somebody, they're watching you, and what you do is important. So, and if you approach something with a negative attitude or like, oh, I'm here today and I have to do this. And I'm not saying I didn't do that, because I did. But, there were days where I was like, oh, I kind of hate this job, or I wish I wasn't here. I'd rather be out with my friends. And that attitude doesn't get you anywhere. You can bring that with you every day, and it's going to do nothing but bring you down. It's actually our job to try to bring ourselves up every day. And I learned that really early on.
Wow. What about like this hard work, like ethic that I know that you have? Where did that begin for you? Was it something your parents instilled? Did you see somebody else like displaying that? Where was that first brought to your attention? Where did you learn that from?
Well, I've actually recently sort of discovered what all that has been for me. I think that I originally, I grew up in like a lower middle class kind of family. My parents were divorced. I lived with my mom and my brother, so single mom, and she was single mom in it. And I knew to be self-sufficient. And so the things that I wanted, I needed to go and work for. So part of that was, if you want the thing, go earn the thing. And it's not going to get handed to you. And even though my parents had means to provide certain things, they were like, great, if you want that, go get it. Or, here's some chores you can do that will pay you for when they're completed to our satisfaction. And so some of that was literally from need and want. The other part of it was I actually was working really hard, I think, in an attempt to feel loved and to have acceptance. And while I love that that motivated me and it certainly made me financially successful, that's never ending. Like you could always want
Mhm.
more of that. And I felt
Mm,
like ultimately it was a little futile. And it's actually a warning to business owners and this is a big philosophy of mine. When you start a company, when you are in business, it is your duty to yourself to make sure you're growing a company that provides you the life that you want. That's the
mm,
number one reason to start a company. Maybe you have a job and you're thinking, "Oh, I want to be an entrepreneur," and that always sounds very exciting, but it's also very hard. And the whole point would be to set up your company in a way that honors the life that you want to live. Because as
mm,
entrepreneurs, you get to pick that. The only person who defines that
yeah.
really is you. And I
Mm,
think for a long time I was defining it by other people's, um,
mm,
you know, uh, status or, what other people would think was successful. But being
mm.
successful for me personally, outside of the confines of what I thought somebody else was thinking was the most freeing thing I've ever done.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was recently with some girlfriends and we were just talking. We're all business owners, we're all moms, we're all, carrying big loads as so many of our listeners are experiencing as well. And really talking about like entrepreneurship and it's this great opportunity to create and live the life that you want to, but we oftentimes forget that. And so I would just love to hear from you, Samantha. How do you think entrepreneurs at any stage can make sure that they are going back to setting up a business that supports the life that they want to live? Because I that gets backwards
Mhm.
sometimes, or you're in a hustle season forever and then you're so burnt out. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, they call it kill the hustler. Right?
Hmm.
So somehow
Yeah.
in the United States culture, there's like hustle, show up early, stay late, work through
Mhm.
lunch, all of that. And that is great for somebody, but give that
Yeah.
1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you call it, and you're nothing but exhausted and overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
really, it goes back to you can't be so busy that you forget to pay attention to your intuition and your
Hmm.
needs. And so again, if you start building something and it's taking a lot of time, I also called it like the PETA factor, the things that were a pain in the ass. If they were a
Mhm.
pain to do, if I didn't like to do them, but I kept doing them, it would really kind of keep me stuck in this cycle of consistently doing things I didn't like. And so
Mhm.
you really do have to slow down. You need quarterly self meetings or at
Mhm.
least annually. And how is this going for me? Do I like what I'm doing? Is this the direction I wanted it to go? Is it providing the life that I was looking for when I started it? And your definition of what you want will change over time because we're all always growing. But at the same time, you can't be so focused on how many widgets have we sold and what's the number and what's the revenue goal, and that you've
Mhm.
actually forgotten about the joy of being with your team, the joy of
Mhm.
having afternoons off with your spouse. Maybe I mean, for a
Mhm.
long time, for 3 years, Mike and I worked nonstop and we only took off Sunday afternoons.
Mhm.
So we would show up to the office around 9 in the morning on a Sunday. We'd leave at 1 o'clock, and we had from 1 o'clock on Sunday until Monday morning off for about three
Mhm.
years.
Wow.
Wow.
And and that is like, well, that's great. It got the company going, but like we were overwhelmed, tired.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like you end up with more of oh, like a relationship with your spouse that's not like loving, it's functional, right?
Mhm.
And it's like you forget to have fun and you forget to like this is about loving on each other and encouraging each other.
Mhm.
And instead it just turned into a big task list. And so it's easy to I always say there's three people. If you run a company, there's three people in your marriage. There's you, there's your spouse, there's the company. And they all
Yeah.
have their own needs. And you have to
Mhm.
remember to meet them all, or at least
Mhm.
attempt to. And you are one of those equations. You're
Mhm.
one of the three. And so what you need, only you will know. Only you
Mhm.
can say it. Only you can express it or go get it or protect it. And so you want to
Um,
make sure that you're in full alignment with yourself first.
hmm. Yeah, Samantha, I would love to hear you speak a little bit on, and you said this earlier, like I mean, life in general, like it's not a straight, uphill climb to success. There's lots of valleys and dips and all of those things. Entrepreneurship isn't straight up, and you've seen that in your career. But what is the balance of knowing you're in a startup season, or you're just getting started, or you're building something, or you're pivoting even in your business, and there is more time intensive? It is harder where you're at versus, like, how do you find, I don't love using the word balance, but how do you still stay true to your values in creating the business and the life that you want, where it supports your lifestyle, not takes away from it, but also knowing that business is hard, and, like, I am in a time and a place right now where I need to build?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I was there for a really long time. I like to say I
Mhm.
learned almost everything the hard way. And if I don't share what I've learned, then I actually learned it the hard way for no reason. Um,
Mhm.
so, really, it's a season, right?
Mhm.
You might be in a season where like this is going to, require everything from me. Like
Mhm.
A, ask for help, B, get it where
Mhm.
you can, right? But also like you can say I'm going to work this hard for this amount of time. And give
Mhm.
yourself your own time frame and say the next 90 days or this 6 months
Mhm.
or whatever it is for you, before you
Mhm.
check in with yourself. But to have
Mhm.
that check-in is really the thing that brings you back to, okay, well, the first quarter, these were the things I wanted to accomplish. How far did I get? Or, you're like, I'm just exhausted and I can't do it anymore. You have to listen
Mhm.
to that voice because it's actually just telling you to make a shift.
Mhm.
Ask for help someplace maybe where you haven't, but you can't completely discount it. But it's okay to be in work mode and go full force and be 110% in. It's okay to do that. But you
Mhm.
can't do it forever or you'll be nothing but
Yeah.
exhausted. So for
Yeah.
me, I kind of was like, okay, look, I'm going to pick a date on the calendar and hold myself
Mhm.
accountable to my own happiness on that date.
Mm. That's
If I'm
good.
going to, I'll have to make the next harder decision. The decision I don't want to make, I'm still gonna face it on that date and decide,
Mhm.
how do I really feel about that decision? And then start kind of driving back from that point.
I'm curious to go back to the beginning of the automated ATM solutions business, right? So you heard it in the intro. Samantha is like the ATM Cash Queen.
Mhm.
They built. Is it one of the largest ATM kind of networks? I don't even know what you call it. Network ATM businesses in the
Uh,
United States.
yeah, we're
Um,
probably the fifth largest, but yes, go ahead.
Fifth largest. Okay, so like if you
That's
got money
amazing.
from an ATM, there's a high potential that she owned it at one point.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. A really probably wild industry. How did I just want to go back to the beginning. I heard that you started with like very little, just like maybe it was like $2,000 investment or something like that. How did you step your foot in that industry? And just tell us about the beginnings. I always want to hear. I just love hearing that because I think a lot of our audience relates with that, where they're like, I feel like I'm onto something. There's
Mhm.
something here. I'm investing. It's scary.
Yeah.
So bring us back to early days of that
Yeah.
business.
It's quite the origin story, actually, because um, Mike and I were both working in a medical building. He was
Okay.
working for a small medical clinic, and I was actually doing marketing for a physical therapy clinic in
Oh,
the
wow.
same building. And the doctor group that he worked under, my company was technically separate from his, but they were fraudulently billing the state for workers' comp
Mhm.
claims. And long story short, that the doctor he worked with, who knew the people who were not doing it correctly, said, "Hey, we all know what you're doing, and I know, and Mike knows." And they fired him the next day and just said, "Hey,
Mhm.
it's not working out." And you're like, "Where'd that come from?"
Sure.
Then they refused to let me in the building. They said I was a
Wow.
security risk, which, like, because I might market I might
Yeah.
market somebody and it's very risky. We got taken to our knees. And this is important for anyone to hear. A lot of times you see the success of somebody, wherever they got to.
Mhm.
Maybe that's what compels someone to want to talk to them or even our podcast here today, right? But so many people have fought fires that you don't know about, and everyone
Mhm.
has a story. But this story, we felt so betrayed and so wronged because neither one of us had done anything wrong at our job, but we both got let go. So we have almost
Mhm.
like zero income. We had a two-bedroom apartment. We got a roommate who argued with his girlfriend and broke all of our dishes on the floor. Like you're just like, what's going on? We both got temp jobs, like, within a few days. Mike had actually gone to MRI school, and within a few days, we were both kind of working temp jobs, trying to just make ends meet. And the ATM industry was brand new; it had just started, and nobody really knew about it. And we were like, oh, well, maybe that's something we could do. A friend had kind of introduced us to it. And we were trying to sell ATMs, but they were like $16,000 a piece. But we could get them at our rate, which was like $6,000 a piece. And I grew up in San Francisco, and I was like, I know where to go. Who needs ATM machines? It's all these mega nightclubs downtown San Francisco, no in and out privileges, no credit cards. I'm like, that's our audience. And I made a little flyer, and we walked down to the, south of Market area in San Francisco where all these mega nightclubs were. And we went in at like 9 o'clock on a Friday night when just the staff is there setting up, and started pitching them to buy a machine, which they didn't want to do. It seemed expensive, risky. What if technology changed? And finally we just said, well, what if we did it? What if we bought the machine and put it in your club? And right. And like, we'll just do it, and you don't have to do anything. You'll get a little bit of that transaction fee. And they were like, okay, great. And actually our very first deal was at Rob Schneider, the comedian, his nightclub in San Francisco that his sister was running. In fact, we didn't even know it was his club. We just knew April Schneider. And we were there getting documents signed. And she's like, oh, I think the owner is here. And the door opens, and here's Rob Schneider. It's like, I know that guy. I'm like, wow, this comedian's just standing right there. But anyhow, we bought the first machine on a credit card and drained our bank account of all $2,000 we had to our name.
Wow.
And within the next month or so, we actually had 4 ATM machines, and had gotten our first investor to help us bankroll the machine, the money that goes in the machine. We got an investor to help with that. And it grew from there, and it ended up being national, working with distributors nationwide that ran their own routes. And we became kind of a master wholesaler, making sure they got the best pricing.
Wow.
That's incredible. Now, for people that don't know, like me, how do ATM machines work? Like, we're not pitching get into the ATM machine business.
Yeah, it's actually like kind of an aging industry at this point. But yeah, I mean, basically, you've got a card. It communicates to a network. The network verifies you have money in your bank account. The message gets sent back to the ATM that says it's okay to dispense this amount that the person's requested. When you say yes to that, it charges you a fee. Like now the fees are.
And then you're making money. The ATM is making money on the fee. And so like for that nightclub, for example, you pay them a percentage of the fee. So there's kind of like no risk to them. And you guys are making money on the fee.
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
Wow.
And like, was there a bunch of like hoops you had to jump through, like illegal and banks and all those things? Or like, how did you guys learn all this?
The interesting thing about any gold rush or any new industry, and I think we saw a little bit of this, like even with Bitcoin, is that initially it's like the wild, wild west, right? And everyone's like, I don't know, I think we can do this. I think, okay, fine. And you're sort of winging it. Like there was no reporting. It used to take me like for 4 ATM machines to close out the month, it would take me like, I don't know, 5 hours. And at the end, I'm settling out 7,000 ATMs a month, and it was taking me 10 minutes. Right. So like technology really changed, but initially you're like, I got to do it all myself. And so there were less regulations then than there are now, but there certainly were some. And you still had, you had to be compliant. Obviously being honest and doing the right thing was critical. Anytime you're ever in a situation where someone's like, well, it's kind of a gray area. And, if you take it the wrong gray area, if you go the wrong direction, you're really just self-defeating your growth, and it erodes trust, just inherently erodes trust from people, whether they know it or not, is my belief. So we always were just trying to do the right thing. And that does require a lot of work up front.
Now you end up scaling this business and exiting the business, selling the business. What is something about exiting a business that people don't talk about, but should?
When you spend your time preparing for sale and you think you're ready to go, you're actually just have prepared yourself and you're not
Mhm.
ready.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it. And it really, probably the number one thing about an exit is you have to build something somebody wants to buy.
Mhm.
And you also have to be prepared to exit at a time that works for your buyers.
Hmm.
So, you might build a great thing, but if it's not anything anybody else wants to buy, like for instance, if we're the face of it and we're the ones running it every day, if we can't be replaced or there can't be a management person taking over, a lot of people didn't want to buy it. So we spent a lot of time coming up with like procedures and processes and SOPs and KPI, all these
Yeah.
business terms, coming up with things so we could be replicated, which,
Hmm.
really actually changed the game. And then at the point where we were looking to sell, and this could go for any company, we really knew if you have one buyer, you don't have a lot of options. And so
Hmm.
we really spent a lot of time making sure we had at least two. And I think we had four, and then it looked like
Oh,
three for a while. And then it was just really down to two. And we basically played them off of each other by like, I think they both knew who each other was, but I never
yeah.
said it. But and I would say like, somebody really doesn't want you to buy me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, and I would never really say what the deal was, but I would say,
Yeah.
and I wanted to keep them both in play because that was,
Hmm.
first of all, a way to drive up the amount I was going to be offered. But it was also important that I then didn't feel obligated to say yes to something I didn't really want to say yes to because that would have been my only buyer.
Hmm.
So that was really important, is kind of knowing when to exit and to make sure that we had options.
Hmm. Samantha, regardless if a business owner wants to sell eventually or not, maybe they're, like, I'm just trying to build and make money for my family. They're in like maybe 2 or 3 years in. What are some like non-negotiable systems or things that they should know about their business that you feel like would be beneficial to them?
Non-negotiable. If you build something that you don't like doing, you will not like doing it the rest of your life.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think I kind of did that. Like I hated my job. I used to call it the soul crusher because I was
Yeah.
always in sales and marketing. But for our
Mhm.
company, I did like legal, compliance, and accounting.
Oh, wow.
Like it just
Yeah.
Mhm.
sucked. I loved my clients and I loved like really, we used to say we make millionaires. That was our point. So we
Mhm.
did a lot of like business consulting. Here's all these
Mhm.
different distributors nationwide running their own routes with their own areas. And this was like our opportunity to kind of build something that we liked. But if you build
Mhm.
it the wrong way, if you are overwhelmed, if you don't know accounting, like don't do it.
Mhm.
The number one thing really is when you can hire somebody, it's like that's what you need to do. You need to hire help as soon as you can. I'm thinking back, I would have probably hired better sooner.
Mhm.
I did the whole thing like, oh, well, I know how to do it and it'll take me
Yeah.
longer to explain it.
Mhm.
I can just get it done myself. And then I always had to do it. And,
Yeah.
really the whole point, find people smarter than you. You've heard this. Hire
Mhm.
someone smarter than you to help you. And I was like, no, I've got it. I can do it. Well, then you end up kind of just being stuck. And it's like the law of the lid. You can only
Mhm.
go as high as what you know. You can't
Mhm.
go higher than what you know because you don't know to do it. And when you hire
Mhm.
somebody who's got more experience than you in some section, they bring that level of experience, and now your level goes higher. So you
Mhm.
you can never be afraid to hire someone. And I would have staff and then get new staff come on and they'd be like, "Oh, they're going to do my job. What about where am I here?" And I'm like, no, 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 we can't be afraid to hire people that are better at this than we are. That's growth. That's what growth is.
Mhm. That's good.
Yeah. That sounds good. Now, you ran this business with your husband, Michael. We run a business together. We work with a lot of couples who run businesses. What challenges came out for you guys as a couple working together in business? And yeah, how'd you overcome those?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I have stumbled into my specialty of late. And that
Yeah.
is talking to spouses, primarily women, but if you're married and you work with your husband, you got, like, you have something in common with every other woman that works with their husband, the way the guys do with guys, right?
Oh yeah.
But the real issue is trying to find that balance between sort of work mode and wife mode or spouse mode. The way I might be negotiating hard or talking to somebody in the office is like not how my spouse wants to be talked to.
Mhm.
And because especially when you're building it and there's like here's the thing with owning your own company. You could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's always something else to do.
Mm, yeah.
Like, why do you ever show up on like a Tuesday and you're like, well, got nothing to do today? Like there's always something else to do. So the only
Yeah.
thing stopping you from working 24 hours a day is you. And
Mhm.
putting boundaries for your marriage, putting boundaries on when and how you will discuss work is a game changer. So for a while,
Mhm.
Mike and I said, okay, we're only going to talk about work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then we got to stop. And that was less than we had been doing. Only 12 hours a day, right?
Oh,
And we were sleeping.
Yeah.
But you have to having proper boundaries. That was one we did was reducing the hours. Eventually we got that down to like, okay, we're going to stop, at 5 o'clock or whatever. We're
Yeah.
not going to talk about it over the weekend. Don't talk about it in the bedroom. You're like, if we want to talk about work related something, like there were 2 chairs in the corner of our living room, and we're like, that's the work spot,
Yeah.
and trying not to talk about it over every meal, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we would do this, with kids as well, right? You're like, every
Oh, yeah.
single meal is like working kids, working kids, working kids. You're like,
Mhm.
where are my dreams? And so coming up with things that work for both of you that you'll hold each other lovingly accountable for.
Mhm.
Somebody brings something up and you're like, oh, honey, past 6.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or, you're in the bedroom. Oh, you're not talking about that up here, are you? Okay.
Mhm.
Just little things
Yeah.
like that really do help realign you back to life, not just work.
Mhm. Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think I used to not agree with that, like having boundaries with work but for me personally, like I've really had to protect my nighttime routine and going to bed. And I used to just, at 10 o'clock at night, Stephen and I would be talking about business right before I'm trying to go to bed. And it would just rile me up.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe there are people that can do that. But for me, it's like, I need things to be peaceful. Even if it's like life stuff, like I really try hard to not even have a
Mhm.
conversation with Steven about it because I've
At
just
night.
learned like over the years, like running a business can be stressful. And my cortisol levels, I've already had to work so hard on to like have deep sleep and all that. And so I've really had to learn the last couple of years to really protect that space. And so, yeah, for us, like bedtime for me is like, I'm just like, I don't even want to talk about it because I don't want my cortisol levels to be spiked or my
Yeah.
brain to go spinning when I'm trying to like calm it down because it takes time for me personally to calm it down. And so that is a boundary that I've set that even, 5 years ago, I would
Yeah.
have been like, whatever, we can talk about it anytime. But that was also like, before we had kids and stuff. And now it's like, I need my sleep and I need this schedule. And there's a lot of noise happening and I need to quiet my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
definitely
the
got better too at just not throwing out a random idea at 11 p.m.
Yes.
Like, I have a crazy idea.
Yes,
yeah,
which I've
yeah, I can
So
see you
now
doing that.
I write it down, save for later,
yeah.
so yeah, that's awesome.
Well,
How,
look,
how,
everything is energy in or energy out.
Mhm.
Okay. So every person you talk to is either, kind of feeding into you or potentially taking something out. And the only thing
Mhm.
that stops that from happening is you, like having a
Yeah.
boundary around it. And I know for Mike and I, we most nights listen to about a 10-minute meditation right before we go to sleep. Like we
Mhm.
fall asleep while it's playing. They're like, we're
Yeah.
going to count down from 10 and at like 6 he's snoring, like, whatever. But like little like hacks to get your
yeah,
brain heart coherence, into where you're in a relaxed state and able to stay there. The other thing, like he's a morning person and I'm better in the afternoon. So he likes to wake up early and get a whole bunch of stuff done first, like work stuff first thing in the morning. I kind of like my mornings slow, but the afternoon, my crunch time's insane. I can get so much done between like 1 and 4 o'clock. And it's more like 3 to 5 is my like happy zone. Sometimes I would be working and Mike's starting dinner in the kitchen. I'd be like, oh, it must be dinner time. Oh yeah, look, it's 6 o'clock. Like I've totally lost track of time. But the finding out when you're the best at doing something, or when you want to be approached with a new idea, like, Stephen, you get an idea. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, write that down, honey. And we'll talk about it later. Like those kinds of like, you don't want to lose a good idea. But there's like a great place where your spouse is going to be more receptive or even more creative. Like I'm just more creative in the afternoon. So I think about things differently and I like get I'm like, I'm all buzzing and want to get stuff done. So Mike knows like that's a great time to catch me and have some like sort of exploratory creative conversations.
That's good.
That's awesome. We're almost at time here, but I'll throw one more question at you. I think a lot of our people in our world, they dream about exiting a business, building something, selling it, having that paycheck, boom, hit the bank account. So you've been through this, you've had this happen. What changes afterwards in your marriage, in your business? I mean, of course, in the business, but what was the big change you felt like immediately right after that point?
The day we sold, it was, we were selling 2 homes and moving simultaneously, and it felt like nothing. The literal day. So first of all, you must celebrate the wins. Like take time to celebrate even the little things. This week, what do you feel like celebrating today? Like that's like, do that. But the true exit, ultimately, it took a little bit of time for me to, and I had some duties to the buyer initially. So it was sort of weaning myself off the day-to-day work that I had been doing. But ultimately, it comes back to self-exploration about what makes you happy. So if you've kind of forgotten that along the way, or certainly during the sales process, it's very intense and it took a while to get that all done. I sort of forgot who I was. And coming back to that, when you are in a position to give back, to volunteer, to help other people, to realign yourself with what were my dreams and passions earlier on that maybe I didn't get to explore because I did these other things. Maybe are those still alive in me? Like all of those things, you then have the opportunity to, you just have more time potentially. We actually ended up Mike and I got into investing in multifamily as a way to save money on taxes because we knew we were selling the company. And then it turned into other people were interested in that. And that's how we started Pacific Capital. And like, it became a whole nother thing. I used to sell real estate in college. Like that was I was in college when I started real estate, and here it was all these years later, it came back and it's still a cornerstone of what we do now. And it kind of was like, oh yeah, I forgot how much I liked that and how dynamic it can be. And it does, when you have done great things that you've worked a long time for, you do want to celebrate them, but you also want to be like, how else can I contribute? Like leaving a legacy or helping other people. That's sort of where I stumbled on my own philosophy of, I felt like I had learned everything the hard way. And if I don't share it or share what I've learned at least, then didn't I learn it the hard way for no reason? Wouldn't the point be to help other people, like the people listening right now? Wouldn't the point be to help them not do what I did when, it made me successful, but it didn't make me happy. And ultimately you want both.
Yeah. Powerful. It's awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for being on the Rainmaker Family Show. If our listeners want to connect with you, hear more about what you're up to, what is the best place for them to do that?
Right now it's Samantha at pacificcapitalllc.com. That's my phone number, 509-270-6702. You give me a call.
Hey, awesome. I bet we got some people to take you up on that. That's awesome, Samantha. Thanks for being here. Always a good time having you in the Rainmaker family community.
Thank you.
And if you listen to the show, share it with a friend who is going to inspire, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. If you're not a part of our mastermind yet, I want to say I think you're missing out. Our heart here at Rainmakers is to create total abundance for you. That's why we're offering a free one-on-one family freedom design session for you, our faithful listener.
Yeah, if you want to hop on a call with our team, see if it's a good fit to build a business that creates time freedom for you, financial abundance, and helps you leave that thriving family legacy. That's what we're all about in our mastermind. You can grab a time on our team's calendar at rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind.